Hey BookTube, this is the How I Read tag.
I got my ticket for the long way round.
I'm Jen and I talk about audiobooks, and I have not done a tag in a long time. And Steve Donahue, who I have come to know and love, tagged me recently. He's a relatively new booktuber, but this man is something else, I'll tell you. He lives in Boston. He reads an ungodly amount of books and across every imaginable genre. So I'm going to link his channel, so check him out. He's just someone that you don't find on BookTube very often, and what a pleasure it is. So he tagged me in this tag, and I've done it before, but I thought, he made me think about some things that I hadn't thought of. So I thought, I'll just do it again. So here we go. How do I find out about new books to read? Steve talked about the fact that you can get books suggested to you doing an advanced search on Amazon. Well, I didn't know that. I mean, I get a lot of recommendations on Amazon, but they're very often books I've already read. So I get my book recommendations usually from Audible or from Goodreads or from BookTube. A lot of times people will talk about a new book that they've read and I think, ooh, that sounds interesting. How did you get into reading? Steve brought this to my mind, he said, through the dedication of a teacher at one point or another. And I started thinking about the teachers that impacted my reading. And I remembered Mrs. Johnson in the second grade, who taught me to sing by playing the soundtrack from The Sound of Music. And then she also read the Little House in the Prairie books to us. And I got introduced to Laura Ingalls Wilder and fell in love. When I moved back to Ohio in the third grade, it was in the middle of the year, and I was a little kid who was shy, and I had a hard time fitting in. And my teacher, Mrs. King, introduced me to a reading challenge, and it was the very first time that I got a certificate award because I read X amount of books in a limited amount of time. So I was doing it even back then. Mrs. Darnstadt in the fifth grade always had the weekly readers that were passed out. It's a little flyer that's passed out and produced by Scholastic, and they always had books that you could buy. I would take that home and fill it out, and then on Friday the books came in, and oh my gosh, I couldn't wait. I was so happy that Mrs. Darnstadt had that available to us as kids. I got more books through that program. And then when I went to high school, Mrs. Burney introduced me to The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, and expanded my awareness that there was more than just kids' books out there. And then lastly, Mr. Reno. When I was a junior in high school, I was sitting at my desk one day before the bell rang. I was sitting there with my hands on my hips at my seat. And he looked up at me and he said, "Akimbo." And I said, "What?" And I, like, huh? And he said, "Go look it up." So I got up out of my seat and I looked it up in the dictionary, and what it means is to have your hands on your hips, standing akimbo. And I looked at him and I smiled and he smiled back, and it was like we had this unspoken communication going on, like, you're a smart kid and you need to expand your vocabulary. And I appreciated that so much. These were all teachers that fostered this love of reading in me over the years, and I am so grateful. How has your taste in books changed as you've gotten older? Steve talked about the reflexive snobbery that he had in his younger days, and I think we all have had that to some degree or another. For me, it was trying to keep up with my friends who were all reading The Once and Future King and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and all of these very dense, difficult things to read, and they would talk about them and, "Oh, you've read that, haven't you?" And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do all that stuff. And I would just kind of be quiet and listen and nod my head a lot. I was always sneaking romances because in high school I was reading all the bodice rippers that were popular at the time, and so I am a huge sap when it comes to romance. I am just in love with it, being in love. So I would sneak those while all the rest of the people were reading all this highbrow stuff, or what I considered that. So, my reading obviously has changed and evolved over time, and it kicked back in after my girls said, you got to read The Hunger Games, Mom. That's been about probably 5 years ago, and I fell into YA and I loved it. And I've since refined my YA taste, but I have also expanded into other areas too, some sci-fi and some fantasy, and wow, it's changed a lot over time. How often do you buy books? Have you watched my channel? How did you get into BookTube? I was flipping a house and I was constantly on YouTube finding ways to do stuff. I didn't know how to tile a countertop, and I didn't know how to, install baseboard. And I was constantly on YouTube figuring out how to do that. And so I was listening to audiobooks at the time, and I would think, I need another one. What else is out there? I read about this on Goodreads. Is there a review about it? Then I discovered this whole community, and I thought, well, I could do that. And not only that, I listen to audiobooks, and nobody's really talking about those exclusively. So I should do that. I'll talk about them. So that's how I got into it. It's been about 2.5 years. It'll be 3 years in July, and I am still loving doing this, clearly. And I've met so many people, and I'm so grateful. I'm one of the best things I've ever done has been to start a BookTube channel. How do you react when you don't like a book or the ending of a book? I react passionately. Of course, I'm passionate about everything, but when I don't like a book, that book is dead to me. I hold grudges. I hate books. There are books that I can rattle off the top of my head right now that I can tell you that I hate. I still hate them. I really have been known to throw it across the room. Fortunately, I've never thrown my iPod across the room. Hopefully I'll never do that, but I make no guarantees. Steve mentioned that nobody over 45 knows how to end a book anymore. Now, I think he was talking largely about nonfiction, but I gotta tell you, this whole trend of trilogies, it's like, is there going to be an end? Why do we have to stretch the story out over 3 books? It's like authors are trying to write what publishers want, and publishers want to make money. They want stuff that sells, and so they, it's like movies these days. They always split the last book into 2 movies. I don't know why they do that, other than the fact that it's going to draw us into the movie theater and spend our money. How often have you taken a sneak peek at the end of a book? Okay, I am not a 5-year-old who is naughty, Steve. And I look at the end of the book from time to time, because for me, it's not about the surprise. It's about the journey. It's about how the book goes about getting to the end. It's not really about the end. I don't mind being spoiled. I really don't. I have trouble not spoiling things for other people. But that said, I do like some element of not knowing what's going to happen. And there are books that I will not look at the end, specifically because I think I don't want to know. And I won't read reviews on those books either, because I want to not be spoiled. So there are times when I don't want to be spoiled, but most of the time I don't care. I do look at the end of the book occasionally, especially if it's a book I'm not enjoying and I just want to get to the end. And lastly, who do you tag? Well, I'm not going to tag anybody just because I know this tag has gone around and around and around BookTube, even though a lot of the BookTubers I've started watching have, like maybe 200 or 300 subscribers, and I know they're relatively new to BookTube. But what I'm going to tell you is go watch Steve. Go visit his channel and really enjoy Steve. He is such a pleasure, and he is so interesting. The stuff he reads, the stuff he talks about, just all of the wonderfulness that is Steve. So that's the How I Read tag again, and that is it for now from me. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
When I'm gone, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my walk. You're gonna miss me by my talk. Oh, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone.